Neal Battaglia, saxstation.com. If you try and talk and don't use your tongue, it kind of sounds like this. You can probably sort of understand that, but it's hard to distinguish the words clearly. It's not articulated well. So to speak, you usually need to use your tongue to articulate. It's very similar on the saxophone. Just keep in mind that you can overdo the use of your tongue when you articulate. The other day, I was reviewing a video from a beginning saxophone player, and I noticed it didn't sound quite right because they weren't using their tongue to articulate. Sometimes not using your tongue much, or at all, is appropriate. For example, when I play in a sentimental mood, I can play it without using my tongue, and it pretty much sounds right. But slurring together the notes for the bass line for Stand By Me, like another beginning saxophone player did, doesn't sound quite right. So slurring, not using your tongue, is appropriate sometimes, but not other times. In general though, if you slur and don't articulate using your tongue, you're going to hear pretty quickly if there are any issues with the technique in your fingers. So you might hear extra notes in between the notes you mean to play, something that some people call schmutz. A lot of times you do want to use your tongue to articulate. For example, on the Stand By Me bass line. If I didn't use my tongue to articulate and I just separated the notes with breaths, it would sound like this. Basically, that kind of sounds like it erased a lot of years that I've been playing saxophone. So if you're trying to articulate, separating it with breaths is not an efficient way to do that on the saxophone. I think that one reason I noticed that the beginning saxophone player was doing that is because I actually did that myself for a few days when I first started to play the clarinet. Luckily, my teacher at the time pointed it out to me and suggested that I started to use my tongue to articulate. So I started to use my tongue to articulate, and it wasn't that I could do it perfectly immediately, but I did start to learn how to do it, and I developed that skill. By using your tongue, you gain control over the start and finish of the note. Your tongue both starts the airflow and ends the airflow. There's going to be music where you want to use your tongue to articulate on the saxophone, and other times when you don't want to use it much at all. For example, starting a phrase without using your tongue might be a good thing, especially on a ballad. Two basic options for thinking about tonguing on saxophone are using the syllables ta and da. Ta would sound like this. And da would sound like this. So basically, ta is more of a sharp attack, and da is more of a smooth way to articulate. Try experimenting with those two movements of the tongue when you play. When you articulate, you're touching your tongue to the reed, and you can think about how you move your tongue using those two different sounds. You can explore the idea of articulation a lot more. You can get into exercises that are in method books, etc. But those are two ideas that you can start to use when you begin to articulate on the saxophone. Let me know what questions you have about articulation. On saxstation.com, there are classes and lessons available. I have a beginning saxophone players class. I have a class on scales, another one on chords, a few other classes. You can do one-on-one lessons with me, including on Zoom. I have a beginning saxophone players group on Facebook that you can join. Just go to the link, answer the questions. You can talk to some other beginning saxophone players, ask some questions, and get some feedback on your playing.